Cold day in the year 2000. A young Randolph, a PlayStation 2, and a genre-bending launch title.
Red Faction, a stripped-down immersive sim with survival horror elements that sees the player step into the spacesuit of Parker, a miner who came to Mars with the promise of great riches, but finds himself a slave, worked to the bone in dangerous conditions, with no way out. Until one fateful day. The miners were promised that in exchange for a year of labor on Mars, they could earn enough to live a life of luxury back on Earth. That was a lie. Mars is a hellish death camp. Once you arrive, you're never leaving. There is a plague creeping its way through the tunnels, taking the lives of the miners. And the airborne pandemic claiming the lives of hundreds are not even the worst thing on the planet. The Altor Corporation is the planet's real monster, and the miners have no way of rebelling. Until now. As Parker's shift is over, the Red Faction, a guerrilla fighting force that hides out in the tunnels and fights also in the shadows, orchestrates an attack on the corporation, and caught in the crossfire
Is you, Parker.
Being mistaken for a Red Faction member, you have no other choice than to take up arms and follow the resistance. Not that you would need much convincing. It's only a matter of time before the plague, an accident, or one of the weird monsters that lurk in the tunnel
Become the death of you anyways.
You grab a stun baton from a dead Altor security guard, and then you start the fight. Gameplay is great. Movement is fast and fluid courtesy of Mars's gravity and the suit Parker is wearing. And the gravity and movement will actually change when Parker is out of the suit and in another environment. This also makes jumping for the most part more video gamey, but also completely realistic, which is a
Fun little coincidence, you know?
The big draw of the game is naturally the destructive environments. Unless something is made out of steel, you can blow a hole in it. If you do not have a keycard to a door, you can blow a hole next to the door and make your own doorway. And it's a viable strategy throughout most of the game. Vehicles are fun and you spend just the right amount of time in them. Long enough to get a feel for how to blow stuff up, but not quite enough time to get bored. Which could happen very easily because a lot of the vehicles like the driller here
Pretty slow.
It's weird playing an early 2000s shooter that has such an emphasis on body part specific damage. Like I use a lot of other weapons in the game, but the OP-ness of headshots makes me go back to the pistol again and again. It has an extremely fast rate of fire, and it handles nicely, and due to the location based damage, a headshot from that is just as good as a shotgun blast to the chest. Not that the shotgun generally is bad, it's a good shotgun, it's just not capable of gadonking 3 or 4 enemies in quick succession from a distance. Parker makes his way from the mine tunnels and into the facility. Here, things get interesting as we move from being able to freely use explosives in the tunnels and fight enemies from a long distance, to the claustrophobic quarters of the Altor facilities, where most things are explosive proof and combat is much closer and tighter.
Due to the closer quarters.
I like that when the environment changes, the game changes just a tiny bit of stuff to shake things up, like security terminals and security cameras that you need to deal with to avoid Altor sending reinforcements. While Parker was in the mines, he came into contact with Eos and Hendrix via radio, 2 prominent characters within the Resistance. Hendrix guides him through the facility where Parker sabotages a thermal plant, hopefully crippling Altor's power situation, and from there, Parker chases after the rebels hoping to catch a shuttle with them back to the Resistance base. But unfortunately, he arrives a little too late due to being caught up in a fight against a reprogrammed mining robot. But in a twist of fate, being late saved his life. As the shuttle takes off, we learn that the power supply wasn't crippled enough to take out the base's defenses, and the shuttle the rebels are on gets shut down. Parker is then guided through the partially broken down tunnels of a former mining site in order to find and sabotage another Altor facility. And here, things get weird. There are living animals and plants around, and something is clearly lurking in the shadows, and it's not Altor. Before we get a chance to investigate the weirdness, Altor shows up and we're then chased into the ventilation system and battle our way through the fans. A thing I've been neglected to mention until now is how fucking alive the world feels. Like, even for today's standards, this feels real. Little things like the ability to sneak and holster guns and get rid of bodies, and how NPCs react different to that depending on their role in the facility. The guards will investigate and the civilian personnel will run off to look for guards to investigate. The level design also just tells stories. There is graffiti, propaganda posters, clutter, employees hooking up in supply closets, and all that in conjunction with everything having unique animations and the player's movement being so smooth and giving the player the freedom to crawl through broken windows and all that it just
sells the world.
After actually sabotaging the thermal plant, we make a daring escape via submarine through the flooded tunnels of Mars. Oh well. See, even though I'm on my X230, this is still a very old game and very easy to run on this system. So the FPS is way above 60, and when it is that, things can get weird. And what gets weird during this section is that the sub blows up when dumped into water for whatever reason. So I had to go install Dash Faction, a community patch that, among other things like giving resolution options, also caps the game's frame rate and lets us put the sub back into the water without it going boom boom. Back in a now widescreen game, we jump into the sub and blast a couple of other subs and then attack the secret underwater altar lab. Underwater. From the lab we gain access to Altar's administrative facilities. And here things get a little different. Parker has to get in a suit and tie and then sneak his way through the facility,
which I naturally did flawlessly without raising any alarms.
After making contact with Griffin, Parker and Griffin escape through the admin facility and fight their way to a not a helipad, some type of other helicopter-like flying machine pad. And they get on one of the flying machines and then fly through the partially terraformed tunnels and land at a facility where they are then ambushed by a massive combat robot. Parker lures the robot into an incinerator, and after the fight, the Red Faction shows up and takes Griffin with them, but leaves Parker, which he is not too pleased about. Parker is a fucking asshole and I kinda like that.
He's been a slave, so it makes sense that his social skills are a little lacking and that his anger is in full force, and that he feels extremely betrayed by this new faction that is totally dependent on him and treats him like shit.
Great. Screwed again.
Through the incinerator is another lab where Capek, a mad doctor and possible plague cure haver, is hiding, and Parker makes his way there and confronts him, and then chases him through a series of tunnels and battle Capek's mutated animals and wildlife. And at a super secret lab he learns that Capek does indeed have the cure to the plague, because Capek engineered the plague in the pursuit of evolving humans
to be able to survive on the surface of Mars.
Parker chases down Capek and confronts him, and as the confrontation is about to go down, Eos herself shows up
and joins the fight.
The two pacify Capek but do not kill him. They need him to make the cure for the plague so the miners can be cured,
including Eos, who herself is also infected.
Eos stays behind and deals with that, and Park is then off to dismantling Altor's missile defense shield, and this involves shooting off into space and onto a heavily fortified Altor space station, and then blowing that up and making a daring exit via escape pod, and crash landing back on Mars, where we finish the fight by assaulting the Altor mercenary base and killing the commander and stopping Altor from blowing up the remaining operational facilities. And with that, the EDF is in control of Mars, and Earth now knows the truth about Altor, and the day is saved.
For now.
Red Faction is a childhood classic of mine, and I have spent hundreds of hours in the game's local multiplayer mode, playing split screen with friends. But I don't think I have ever completed the campaign until now, and it's pretty good. Unlike most games of its ilk, it actually keeps up a consistent amount of player freedom throughout the entire experience, right up until the very end. It's a cool setting, it's a cool twist on the normal shooter formula, and if the series comes back, I would like it to return to this type of game, because the sequels are certainly not like this. Red Faction 2 is kind of ass, Red Faction Guerrilla is fun and new, and Red Faction Armageddon is interesting, but none of them are as good as this.
Anyways, this has been it for me. Go play Red Faction. It's a neat little game that combines elements from immersive sims and horror games, and also with a few twists of its own, like the location-based damage, which was at the time very novel and actually kind of disappeared for a while. At least disappeared to the at least disappeared in the form that it is present in this game. So yeah, go play that. It's very fun and it's dirt cheap on PS2 because it was a launch title for the system, at least in Europe. So yeah, go play that. Until next time, bye bye.